Let's go through an additional example, looking at the disaggregated categories that are available for different data elements. So what if we have a data element that's separated into disaggregations? This could be, for example, a data element that collects information on male and female, or it could have certain age groups that are attached to it. Let's take a look at this concept in a bit more detail. Here in my data, I'm going to work with a data element. Let's work with something from HIV. Beside the data element group, I have this option to select totals or details. The total is a summation of the data element, including its individual categorizations. So for example, if I have a data element that's broken down into male and female, what I see in the total is the sum of male plus female. If I click on details, then I begin to see different categories associated with my data elements. You can see the different disaggregations, such as female and male, start to appear. If I scroll down a bit more, you can also see that there's sometimes multiple disaggregations that are associated with one particular data element. For example, HIV test performed has both the sex, which is male and female, as well as the service type. This is where the test was performed, including TB, other, or PMTCT. Let's have a look at the HIV test performed for these individuals between 15 to 19 years of age. We can select these groups by double-clicking on the individual items that appear. So if I want to look at the males, I will just double-click on those particular data elements. We then go to our periods, just as before. Let's deselect the last 5 years and look at the last year. For my organization unit, I'll just select Training Land. I'll check my layout very quickly. I've only selected one organization unit, so it's okay if it's acting as the filter. My rows are my periods, which is last year, and my data is the data elements that I've selected. Let's go ahead and update the table. Here we can see that this HIV test performed data element is now broken up into disaggregates, including male, other, male PMTCT, and male TB. But this is not always ideal. If I go back to the Data tab, I can see that there are two disaggregates associated with this data element, male and other. Right now, there's no way for me to select only male cases, or for example, other cases that include both female and male cases together. We can see that the female cases are completely separate in this example. In those cases, it's often better to add these disaggregates as their own data dimension to the table. So let's go ahead and go through an example which allows us to accomplish this. We're going to change back from details to totals. See here that the data element I was working with, HIV test performed 15 to 19 years, attached to this data element is the disaggregations of male and female, which includes sex, and other PMTCT and TB, which is the HIV service. If I scroll down, I can see that these disaggregations are available as data dimensions. This allows me to add these as additional dimensions to my analysis. Here I can click on gender. You can see that male and female are available. I can use these double arrows to select both male and female. I also have the HIV service available. You can see here that PMTCT, TB, and other are present. Let's use the double arrows to move these from available to selected. Back to my data, I just want to make sure that I selected the data element that I'm working with. So I will double-click on this HIV test performed data element. Now that I selected my data element and my periods, our organization units are still maintained from our previous selection. Let's go back to the layout and see what's happened. Now I can see there are additional dimensions for the gender and HIV service. We can then choose where these appear. We can filter them out completely or have them appear separately in either the column or row of this particular table. For example, if I move the HIV service down to the row, I can filter out the period since we're only looking at one period, and I can leave gender in the column and go ahead and click on Update. Now we can see here the HIV service appears as our rows, the sexes for male and female appears in our column. We can see that this provides a lot more flexibility in our analysis when we add in these disaggregations as data dimensions rather than using details. Just be careful when we do this. We have to make sure that we're adding disaggregations that have data attached to the particular data element that we are working with. For example, this data element is already separated into 15 to 19 years. If I try to select an age group, say less than 12 months and 12 to 59 months, it's not going to work. I'll select those age groups and click Update. You can now see that no data appears. This is because there's no actual data attached to these particular age groups for this data element. If I remove these and then click on Update, now I can see that the data appears correctly. Let's add a bit more dimensionality to this analysis. We can add in the facilities so we can see the data broken down by facility. We'll go to Organization Units, change our selection method to select levels, and select the facilities as the organization unit level. Let's check the layout to make sure everything is in the appropriate place. You can see the organization units are currently filtered out. Let's move those down to the row so they will be displayed. I'll move the HIV service to the column, and I'll filter out the data as I'm only looking at one data element. When we update the table, we can see that there's quite a bit of data available broken down by these two disaggregations.